Everybody got a devotion for you today, January 13th, 2021. This past Sunday, we looked at the prophet Hosea. We talked about how God was committed to us even when we're uncommitted to him. And the people of Israel are an example of people who, at that time, were more committed to idols than they were to God. And there's this passage in Hosea 6. We really looked in chapter 1 and 3 and just looked at Hosea himself, but this is part of the prophecy of Hosea in chapter 6, verse 4. It says, O Israel and Judah, what should I do with you, asked the Lord? For your love vanishes like the morning mist and disappears like dew in the sunlight. I sent my prophets to cut you to pieces, to slaughter you with my words, with judgments as inescapable as light. I want to show love. I want you to show love, not offer sacrifices. I want you to know me, not more than I want burnt offerings. But like Adam, you broke my covenant and betrayed my trust. There's this image that their love just vanishes. They would say they love God, but it just comes and it goes. It's there for a second and then it's gone. And God tells them, a passage that's repeated in the New Testament, that I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire your love, not sacrifice. What that means for us is this, as we think about commitment. So we often commit to religious practices. We often make these commitments. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to pray every day. And those are good. Just like offering sacrifices was a part of their religious system, and it was good. But the practice in and of itself has no meaning. The practice in and of itself is not what God desires. God's saying stop worrying about sacrifices and start showing mercy to each other. Start loving one another. Stop worrying about burnt offerings and come to know me. I want you to know me more than I want your sacrifices. Are you committed to knowing God and loving one another? That's really what we need to be committed to. And committing to all the religious practices in the world isn't going to change that. If your heart's not committed to those things, the practices themselves, just reading your Bible and praying isn't going to change all that. If your heart's not committed to loving and knowing God. He says here, you've broken this covenant. They're still going through the motions. They're still going through the rituals. They're still going to church every Sunday, still saying their prayers, reading their Bible, doing what they're supposed to do, doing all the things that I got to do. God says, you betrayed my trust. You broke my covenant. That's not what I asked of you. Are you committed to knowing God, to knowing his heart? In having your heart changed by him. He's committed to you. That's what Hosea demonstrated. Are you committed to him in the same way? Are you committed to having your love for him not vanish when life gets hard? To not vanish when something else comes along? To not disappearing when you decide that there's someone or something else that deserves your attention? Just going through the religious motions isn't going to change your life. Coming to know, experience, and give the love of Jesus Christ to one another is what will change you. Knowing him. Not knowing how to do all these religious things, but knowing who he is. Are you committed? Do you trust him enough to just desire to know more of him? Now, of course, the things that we do, those religious practices, can play an important part in us knowing that. But in and of themselves, they don't have meaning. In and of themselves, they're not enough. In and of themselves, they're not what God desires. Have you committed your heart to what God desires for you today? To loving him with all your heart, to loving each other with all of your heart, to knowing him above all else.